Hi, I'm Teresa from Takingdiabetesheadon.com. We are here in our peer-to-peer segment on Taking Diabetes Head On. On these segments, we talk to our peers about their experiences with diabetes in every aspect. Here today, we are with Gwen and Jim, who's been married for 49 years, and Gwen has been diabetic for 21. Welcome.
Welcome. I'm Gwen.
I'm Jim, Gwen's husband.
Welcome. So Gwen, you come to our diabetes support group, and that's how we know each other, and you've been coming for quite a while. So can you tell me a little bit about you? I know you're a teacher. Can you tell me about what grades and stuff like that?
I originally started teaching in South Dakota and taught there for 22 years. Even taught in a one-room country school for 3 years.
Wow.
So I've really taught all grade levels. And then I taught third grade there for a lot of years. And then when we moved to Las Vegas in '87, I started teaching second grade here and have taught my other 23 years of teaching second grade in Las Vegas.
What made you decide to become a teacher?
Always wanted to be a teacher.
Really?
Never. I mean, when I was in high school, my principal, that was in the time, when secretaries were quite important. And I remember signing up for a class. My principal even said to me, "But Gwen, you're going to be a teacher." And so really, that was a lifelong dream for me, which came true.
Wow. So you guys have been married for 49 years, and you've been there in Las Vegas. Can you tell me when you were diagnosed, what happened, and what symptoms did you have?
Yes, I became very, very thirsty. And I hate to even look back now and remember going to bed at night with a huge Texaco cup of water beside the bed. And I'd probably get up in the middle of the night and fill that up.
Wow.
And it just kind of went on and on. You had to go to the bathroom a lot. And eventually, real suddenly, lost a whole bunch of weight. And then when I went to the doctor here, I walked in and I said, I think I'm diabetic. And he looked at me and just kind of joked because he knew me. And he said, "Oh, I bet you probably have bladder infection." Well, it didn't take long. He tested my blood sugar, which was over 300. And he was out in the hall calling to a medical supply to get me with my strips and testing machine and so forth.
Wow.
So,
Do you remember that when she was diagnosed, Jim?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. But
Did you think about diabetes like she did?
no, it's strange, but I couldn't put it together at the time that I should have known it because I had a friend that got it at one time too. But
Is there any family history of diabetes in your family, Gwen?
oh yes, my dad was always diabetic long before I was even born. So it
Oh,
wasn't
so you-
like a shock,
Ah, I see. Okay. All right. So you taught. Did you have any diabetic kids in your school that knew, or did they know about your diabetes? And how was it being a teacher with diabetes since you were newly diagnosed and you're adjusting to get your insulin, your sugars good? How was that?
I'll think back to the 1980s when I was teaching here. And believe you me, that was before cell phones or your phones that you took out from the office and would recharge at the end. And that was long before I was diabetic too. And we had just gotten the whole class out there for field day, way at the end of the field. And I had a little boy that was diabetic. And all of a sudden, it's probably the worst look on a face I've ever seen of a diabetic having a low, put it that way. And there wasn't anyone else. No one had a phone out there or anything. This was in the 80s. And I just remember I just had to leave my class and help him the long, long ways. We just made it in. And I walked in with him. The nurse's office was quite close. I just gave his first and last name and I said diabetic low. And then I knew I safely had him to where he could get medical attention. And then I just went back out to my other kids. And probably the neatest part of that experience was as we were going through field day, all of a sudden, I feel a little tap, tap on my arm. And here's this smile of this child. And he says, "I'm back." And I just put my arm around him and I said, "Oh, good," And then I just led him over and I says, "Here, why don't you join this team?" And he was fine the rest of the day. but you never made a big deal of it. As a teacher of diabetic children, I always try to get them to live the most normal life they can, but I was always there watching and had their backs for them.
Did your students know you were diabetic?
Later on, my last years, I think they did, but I did not say it right away at first before I was on insulin shots. I probably didn't at that point, but then always more in the later years, yes.
Is there a reason for that, or is just...
I don't know. Can't really tell you. I mean, maybe their parents knew more, because as I'd visit with them at conferences, I'd always tell them I was diabetic, but I probably didn't make a big deal out of it in front of the students.
Okay.
And then some other ways that you deal with, and I'll say you work as a team. In our group, we always talk about a team for every diabetic, and I like to think of a teacher being a team, and the school nurse is so very, very important. And I must also add the school nurse and also your health aide, because on some days the nurses are sharing 2 different schools back and forth.
Very, very true.
And I had this one little guy, and he was really struggling. He'd come up, he'd either be super low or super high. And I was to the point, I was very inwardly worried about him, because our room was the furthest from the nurse's office as you could possibly get. And I was worried about not knowing if he actually got there at times. So I went to the nurse and I said, what do you think of if we do a buddy system where he'd have a buddy walk with him? That way I'm not buzzing into the office, bothering everybody, and walk back. And she said, I think that'd be a great idea. So I had this one kid, he could be borderline, a little bit of a discipline problem, but he trained just beautifully. I took him out, and I never want him to be scared of a diabetic, but I took him out and I said if he would like to walk with him. And then I also trained him that I'll just use the name Georgie, had trouble walking or didn't feel good at all, I said just help him sit down in the hallway. He can lean against the wall. And then I said, don't run back to our room. I said, I looked at him first because he was so funny, and I said, are we allowed to run in the hall? He goes, oh no. And so I said, you first help him down so that he's sitting safely. And then I said, you run to the nurse's office. And then I said, if some teacher yells at you for running, just say, please talk to Mrs. Vedral. And so we did that. And then I also had to have them trained in case somebody wasn't right there. There was 2 doors in the nurse's office. I said, go on through, because our secretary at school was so good, she would know, And then I trained him not to go in the nurse's office. Open the door. If the nurse or somebody was there, your mission is over. He took that job. I mean, in adult life, if he can be an employee of a company, he would just be the most responsible person ever. And he would come back, and I might be teaching a small reading group, and he had that swagger of the Fonz, if you remember. And then he'd always come back with a 2 thumbs up like that. Aww. And that was like mission accomplished, And then I'd mouth okay or thank you, or I'd give him a 1 thumbs up. But then it got to be so much with him. If I was teaching standing up at the other side of the room or something, and my diabetic student would get up to come towards me, I knew right away he needed to go to the office. So I wouldn't have him walk to the front. I knew. I would just take my finger and nod my head yes and point to the door. Well, the buddy guy, he would be at that door already, holding the door open. Aww. And he just took that job. Now, we never had to go to any of the Plan Bs all year. But I can tell you, my diabetic boy made a wonderful buddy friend for the whole year. And I am rest assured that if he ever had trouble out in the playground at noon or so, that this kid would know how to get help or go to a teacher to get help for him. That's nice. One experience I have there. And he's the little boy that my last year of teaching, I lost track of him. 3rd grade, he was on the other side of school, never saw him. 4th grade, he was on the other side of school, never saw him. The last year, he was a 5th grader, as tall as I was. And he knew if I was coming back from the teacher's lounge at noon with my lunch pail that I had checked my sugar and had my shot and everything. And he'd be coming from the nurse's office checking his, because he had the next lunch hour. And he would just come up beside me from behind, and then he'd rub against my shoulder, and he would go like 126. And then I'd go, whatever I was, let's just say 1:30 or something. And then I'd go, oh, good, And then he would just beam. And then I'd say, okay, now you have a really good afternoon or rest of the day. And he'd say, oh, Mrs. Vedral, you have a really good afternoon too. And if you're diabetic, your day goes up and down. And it's really neat to have somebody wish you the last half of the day being a good one.
Well, you guys sounded like you guys really bonded. That was really nice.
Yeah. And then I had one other one I'll share with you. That was towards the end of my teaching career. And this is the importance, I'll warn, if we have parents watching out here of diabetic children, that first week of school, we don't know your child like we do the rest of the year. And so make sure you communicate to the teacher if there's something special that needs to happen. Well, this was the first week of school, and her mom just packed a perfect lunch for her every day. Her carbs were totally counted. Her mom noticed right away she was coming in. And there was food left over, which naturally is going to affect if you're not eating all the carbs that you took insulin for. And so I felt really good about this. Rather than making me the food police, and I had duty in the lunchroom every day, so I was right there. We didn't do that way. We went a team effort. The nurse's office was right on the way back to our room. And we just had it that if she didn't finish her lunch someday, she'd just drop off at the nurse's office, sit down a minute, and finish her lunch, which worked just fine. And I never made a big deal of her being diabetic. The other kids never even caught up. She'd always be about third or fourth from the end. And if she needed to stop at the nurse, she'd hold her lunchbox up and just point to it, and I'd nod and give a big smile. The other kids, she'd just drop off as we went past the nurse's office. And she'd come in. I always read the kids a book after lunch, and she'd just join us. But that way, I didn't have to ever look in her lunch pail and be the food police. That's it. Oh, now finish your lunch or whatever, which I think would have made it worse. But, she matured during the year from being really second graders or first graders at the beginning of the year. Towards the end of the year and further along, if I was walking past, and sometimes she had her whole lunch finished, and she'd just make a point of holding that lunch box open, just to see what my reaction would be. I'd go, wow, or give her a thumbs up. And see, because you didn't do it as an accommodation that you had to do every day, which I'm not for unless it's needed. This way, we only did it when needed. And she was able to do it that way.
Wow, that's great stories. You definitely sounded like you were close to your students, which is really important.
Yeah.
Definitely. What I think is really important is to know you're a teacher. And without teachers, we couldn't be what we are today. I couldn't be a nurse. I couldn't be what I do now without teachers, police, doctors, anybody. Anybody needs a teacher to grow and expand and learn. And as being a teacher and then becoming diagnosed, you had to learn all over again like the student. How did that make you feel? And Jim, after when she's talking, how did that make you feel learning about diabetes?
It made me a healthier person. And when we were young, I always used to tease my wife because she got the Betty Crocker Award in high school, and that's why I married her. Oh. But it carries over to this day for the diabetic cooking, to cook with real food. That's what I look at, and I think I've ducked being a diabetic too because of eating so much better for the last 21 years.
Well, excellent. And what about you, switching roles into being the teacher and then now becoming the student to learn diabetes? Because I know you're really guys are good for coming to my support group as long as you guys have and learning.
I guess I've always had so many teachers in my life, and I just relate to them. I mean, if somebody's up there speaking, I'm on every word they say. And I have to say, after Jim retired, he was able to come to a DIMS, and I never asked him to come, but he came that one time, and he just loves to go to our support group. But you also listen, because he will mimic your husband back at home, only he changes it around a bit. The 150 minutes of exercise per week. He'll go outside and do something. He'll come in, oh, I did my 150 steps today. And he really does listen. I think the first time you came was we had a retired podiatrist in, and somebody asked about foot powder or something, and somebody asked if Z-Zorb was a good powder or something. Next morning he's going to work. He comes in from the garage. He goes, holding up, look at, we're using Z-Zorb. And so I know he listens, but I truly, I just try to read everything I can, and I've just been so much better since going to our support group and the different speakers, and our leader does such a super job. I mean, I've just so grateful that there's people that will teach us, because it has helped so much.
Yes, education is very important to keep on top of your diabetes. You're always learning. Diabetes is always changing, as we know, technology, knowledge, and so you got to continue learning. So definitely.
Diabetes doesn't follow the rules.
And that's
Today you ate correctly. Yesterday you ate correctly, and diabetes will creep up on you and give you a high or a low. And it's why? Everything was perfect. We did everything the way we were supposed to,
Right. How was it when you got diagnosed? Were you on pills, insulin? Did you just exercise, diet only? Can you tell us a little bit about when you were diagnosed?
No, I did pills for many, many years. I'm sure maybe, 10 or so years really that I did quite well. And then I still wasn't that bad. I would be around maybe an 8.0 A1C, but my endocrinologist could tell you I wasn't holding it through the day. And then I started with a long-acting one. That worked for several years at 9 o'clock at night. And then when I finally went, and I never really did that poorly, but when I started a fast-acting, taking my blood sugar before breakfast, following my scale that I had, and then again at noon, taking my blood sugar, taking my shot that was based on so many carbs, and then again at supper time, my diabetic control really, really improved.
Were you scared to go on insulin?
Yes, I was, because I remember at home that many years ago, my dad, I can remember those thick, thick needles, and my mom boiling those syringes to sterilize them. And I had a fear of that from my childhood. And then after my mom passed away, I had to give my dad shots, and that was tough for me to do. But once I saw what the syringes are nowadays and how short the needles were, and they don't hurt, I mean, I totally changed. It's not a big deal anymore.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. So now, what do you do to help your blood sugars now? Do you exercise? Do you eat? And how do you control your diabetes?
I think I do the most. Okay, we eat out, yes. We used to eat out once a week, and I'll have to say since we're retired, twice, and I'm still doing okay. But at home, we're on what we should be. And I have just we've gone real food. I don't go down the frozen food aisle into packaged meals and stuff. However, I'm very glad they're there. And if I'm ever sick sometime, I know I can send Jim, okay, go get a lean cuisine or whatever, and they're there. But at home here, I just totally use real food. And I've done a lot of things that maybe I'll share with our viewers.
Yes, please.
If there's I know the expense of insulin nowadays is unbelievable, as our viewers know. And I've come up with a lot of things that I think are penny pinching, just creative ideas that diabetics could use, and it's amazing. I think the last time I talked to you, you noticed I had a big chicken roasting slowly all day long,
Yes,
and
I
the
remember
smell
that.
was good. That was only $4.94. And from that, we right away in the evening took the skin off the top and just deboned it right away. So that night for supper, we had nice, delicious, tender chicken. And then we had all that chicken broth, which I put in the fridge overnight. And I also tear some pieces of chicken up in there right away for soup. And then the next morning, take off that top layer, which can be just a little bit of fat up there. And you're making yourself homemade chicken soup, which, I don't know, probably the next 3 noons we had a bowl of chicken soup. And look you're not getting all that sodium from using chicken broth from a can. And when I do my cooking, I don't put salt in until the very end, a little bit of salt. I try to hold down our salt. And also, what was left of the chicken meat, we had sandwiches for a long time. And that was $4.94, and you can't even go to McDonald's for that, really. And like last night, I did a small beef roast all day, cooking slowly. And I think for a diabetic, you need to trick yourself that, I don't cook. But if you can put something on in the morning, you can smell it cooking all day. You just go, tonight we're going to have a really good supper. And so I put a little rack in the bottom of the slow cooker, laid the beef roast, and then I put a good amount of water in the bottom so that steams. And then it was just amazing what comes out of there for juices and fat that you don't want to eat. And then about 2:30 in the afternoon, I laid a couple whole potatoes in there and some small baby carrots. It was delicious. And today we're eating cold beef sandwiches, which we had done a lot when Jim was still working. He didn't like to eat out fast food at noon when he was working. So I always did 2 lunch boxes the same. And other things I've done is, Jim, I'll let you tell the story about what we do with the whole turkey.
Oh.
There's always one of our grocery stores here the second week of November for the last several years. If you buy $100 worth of groceries, you get a free turkey. So we always go in, I stick it in the freezer. We had a 22-pound turkey. And a while back, because you're my turkey helper, tell what we do with that turkey, Jim.
We roast the turkey all day long. Then we take it, like the roast chicken, you take it off the bone and you put it in a separate, debone it all, and save the broth again and put it in the refrigerator, and then you can dip off the fats off the top of the broth so you get a nice, decent, non-greasy broth to cook with. And then we grind the turkey, in a grinder. You make nice ground turkey sandwiches, and you can freeze it in little separate baggies, like this will be good for like so many sandwiches, and then you can maybe have 20-30 bags of ground turkey in the refrigerator that you can bring out at different times throughout the year and mix it up and use it in your sandwiches. And
that way you're eating real food, not lunch meat, which we've
and you
tried.
look forward to having it. It's
that sounds excellent. So do you eat, so it sounds like you eat a lot of chicken, beef, low carb stuff. Is that what you guys try to do? Or how many carbs do you normally eat?
I try to stick, my scale is set for 45 carbs. I stick pretty close to that. Unless we're eating out, then I'll splurge a little bit. But just at home, I try to stick with 45 carbs.
But you even watch when we eat out, like, I ain't going to take all that stuff. That's too much. I'll take just a bite of it or just a little, but she does it in moderation, not, well, I'm going to heap up my plate with this and eat only this, like you see some folks do.
Very, 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 very true. Wow, excellent. How else do you help with your diabetes? Do you, because last time, I remember pre-show we were talking about you organize your medicines and calendars. Can you tell our viewers about those?
Yes, my diabetes also improved. It was actually a little sandwich box. It was plastic with a lid on, with the square for your sandwich and a couple little other ones. So I have my alcohol wipes there, my test strips, my testing machine, my lancets, and I take so many syringes and put them in there. And that just moves with me. If I've ever had a low in the middle of the night or so, that tray is right there and I'm not looking around fumbling for stuff. And honestly, if we don't have company, that stays on the table 24/7. I just don't move it because the minute I get up in the morning, I walk right to the table and take my blood sugar. And since doing that, I've done a lot better.
Wow, that's great.
I have to say something. And you keep your Lantus and Novolog in separate places in the refrigerator so you don't grab one or the other accidentally and use quick acting instead of slow acting.
I would like to share with your readers what happened that night because Jim about had a heart attack. I used to keep my Novolog and Lantus on the same shelf in the fridge.
Okay.
And I was teaching, dead tired. It was 9 o'clock. And I pulled the Novolog rather than the Lantus. Didn't know it after I had taken the shot. Luckily, I looked up and I go, oh no, Jim, I took Novolog instead of Lantus. Okay. And it was a big amount. And okay, he panics, so I have to kind of keep him calm. He's walking around with the phone in the hand, ready to call 911, and I'm going, okay, just let me try this a minute. I wrote a note to the ambulance what my mistake was, because I knew I had so many minutes of thinking clearly yet. And then I know he'd never know if they asked him what medications I took. Well, I belong to Medic Alert, and I wear their bracelet. I've always done that. I feel it's very important for diabetics. When I taught school, the secretary there, I said, call the ambulance, tell them I'm diabetic. And I always had my Medic Alert card that they had a copy of it. I said, have them call that number. It's got all my doctors, all my medicine, my husband's number on there. Never had to use it, but I think it's money well spent. And anyway, I laid that card on the table because he was a basket case by that point. And I said, just give that to the guys. I said, let me try this. So I drink juice, check my thing. Just kept doing that. Wasn't doing too bad. I never went totally wild. And then I thought, oh, I need to be eating some protein with this. So then I started, a piece of cheese with cracker a little bit. And actually by about 2 o'clock in the morning, I was pretty much over it and straightened out, but that was a scare. And to this day, I have my long-acting insulin on a bottom shelf of the fridge and my short-acting on the top one.
Wow, that's a great idea. Great idea. What about your calendar you were telling me about?
I do, because with diabetics, I get a 90-day supply, and it can't go on our other calendars. So the one by the computer, every time I get something filled, I count 90 days, and then I'll put how many refills are left and so forth. And that has really helped me with that.
Wow. Is there anything else you would like to tell our viewers?
I do. I really think as diabetics, we need to treat ourselves. And here's something I do, and it has helped us immensely. When we go to the grocery store, I always give myself a treat. Now, before I was diabetic, we might have a couple packages of cookies in our cart, a couple bags of chips or something. So I will look, and it's always from the fruit and vegetable section. I remember one time there was this huge head of cauliflower, the best looking one in the world. And okay, that was my treat that day. I looked at the slip later, it was way over $4. But it was something that was good for me. And okay, Jim has a pennant for a Schwan truck stopping here because the chocolate ice cream's so good, and he follows along where 3 nights a week if he has Schwan ice cream, it's fine. And so when they stop, I've just lately gotten to the point, okay, I'm going to do one treat. And I had an RV friend who's diabetic, and she said, Gwen, the Schwan ice cream truck, their frozen asparagus is just really delicious. So I bought a box of that. That was my treat, and he had his ice cream. The last time they came, my treat was, I haven't had orange roughy fish for ages, and they have a box where it's in 4 separate portions like that. So that's in the freezer, and that's coming as a treat. And I really think that diabetics, if you would, sometimes when you're shopping, instead of go, oh, woe is me, I can't have that, go in the fruit and vegetables section and just try to find something that's special, or, it'll help you.
Wow, excellent. That's a great advice. What about you, Jim? You have any advice for being a caretaker, a significant other of a person with diabetes?
I always try to, if I go to the bathroom at night or something, ask Gwen, how you doing? In case she'd have a low, she could just pass on forever, So I always try to keep up with what's going on and where she at all times. And because years ago her father was in the nursing home and had a low, and nobody realized that he had a low, and he was trying to tell us, and I didn't know he had a low. And he was talking garbled, and we were sure he had a stroke. They took him to the hospital in an ambulance, gave him orange juice when he got there, and he come right out of it.
Wow.
And it was like, oh heavens, that was an experience with a low with a diabetic.
Wow, excellent. Well, thank you, Jim and Gwen. So, as you can tell, we have a wonderful teacher who's been teaching for a very long time, who became a student and is teaching again. And I guess all our viewers will appreciate that one, and we definitely do. We want to thank Jim and Gwen for sharing their diabetes stories to assist so many with diabetes in our new peer-to-peer series on Takingdiabetesheadon.com. I'm Teresa, and I'm taking diabetes head on.
I'm Gwen, and remember, we're all lifelong learners always, and I'm taking diabetes head on.
I'm Jim, and I'm Gwen's husband of 49 years, and we're taking diabetes head on.
Thank you for being our loyal viewers. We are here each episode to help you take diabetes head on. Please like, comment, and subscribe. We love hearing from you all, so please feel free to email us, and don't forget to visit us on our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter page, as well as our website. Thank you.